Thank you. People who recognize the name Linda Greenlaw primarily as that woman who survived the perfect storm generally regard me as fearless, courageous, a leader of men, and of slightly larger stature. I've come all the way from Maine to speak to you, and from this side of the podium I look out at all of your faces, and my first thought is, holy shit, give me a little Swordboat again. Mine is not a world of podiums, large audiences. I come from the roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, put your head down and grind, work-a-day world of commercial fishing. I'm nervous as hell right now. But I have managed recently to convince myself that I actually have a distinct advantage over other speakers in that my audience thinks of me primarily as a commercial fisherman. Because of that, your expectations are fairly low. I do what I can to cultivate those low expectations. They're a little sort of strange source of comfort. I'm way out of my comfort zone. I have made the mistake in the past of sort of taking for granted that my audience might know more about me than they do. So I think the best place to start is at the beginning. I'll give you a general overview, and Q&A is my friend. I have no idea what you might want to know. I have a lot to talk about. Hopefully I'll say enough to stimulate some questions, and I'm really excited that you might have some for me. I was raised on and off the coast of Maine, where boats and fishing are the way of life. I spent my early childhood trying to catch anything that swam or crawled around the shores surrounding my home. When I was at an age where kids were learning to ride bikes, I learned to row. When 10-speed bikes were all the rage, I had my first 10-horse outboard. And so it seemed, at the age of 19, a natural step when I desperately needed money for college to go fishing. Back in 1979, there was a lot of money in commercial fishing. I stepped aboard a commercial sword fishing boat and headed to the Grand Banks. And it was at the age of 19 that I absolutely fell in love with my life. I fished my way through school. I mean, literally fished my way through school. Summers, long weekends, any vacation, I would hitchhike to Portland, Maine, get aboard a boat, even if it was just working on the boat at the dock, working on gear, anything. I think I'm very fortunate. At the age of 19, I found my life's work. Graduated from Colby College with a degree in English, and much to my parents' dismay, took my degree offshore and started fishing year-round. It seems my mother had a law degree in mind for me. It just didn't work out. I fished for 2 months. One wasn't enough. We got another week here. All right. I wouldn't want you to miss anything. I'm actually a little bit nervous about the lecture series. This is the farthest thing from a lecture you're ever going to hear. Bear with me. We'll do the best we can. Went fishing year-round, worked my way up to the captain's chair in a very traditional way. I stayed on the same boat long enough to become first mate, and when the owner of that boat bought a second boat, that was my opportunity to become skipper. I've worked over the course of 30 years, many different boats, many different fisheries, fished anywhere from Brazil to Labrador, pretty much the entire North Atlantic Ocean. Always returning to my first love, which was sword fishing. Yeah, I've been dragging, I've been gill netting, I've been tub trawling, I've been lobster fishing, I've been crabbing. Always go back to sword fishing. I felt I'd reached the top of my game when I was in my late 30s. I was running a boat, the Hannah Bowden, which is the boat featured in The Perfect Storm. And I was doing very well. Really, I was catching a lot of fish, and I felt I was missing something. I felt that I was missing what my contemporaries had. All the girls that I'd grown up with had husbands, children, and I never dreamed I would not have a family. I had a very happy childhood. I was an idyllic childhood. My friends would tell you I've had a very long childhood, and that's okay. I can live with that. But I never dreamed I'd never have my own family. So I gave up sword fishing and moved home to this little island off the coast of Maine called Idaho. And it was good because I could still make my living on the water. I started inshore lobster fishing. The whole family planning thing wasn't very well planned, I guess I should say. And if you've read the Lobster Chronicles, you know that I moved to an island where there are 3 single men. 2 are gay, the 3rd one's my cousin. The family planning thing, yeah, didn't work out. My older sister referred to the Lobster Chronicles as a 260-page personal ad. My status hasn't changed, so it wasn't very well written, apparently. Okay, so moved home, started lobstering, and the book, The Perfect Storm, was published. I got in from lobstering one night, and I had a message on my answering machine, and I remember it to this day. It was many years ago. Hi, Linda. This is Emily Bestler calling from Simon & Schuster. We're really intrigued with this female fisherman thing you have going on. We've read The Perfect Storm. Do you want to write a book? And at the time I thought, that sounds like a lot of work. No, I do not want to write a book. I've been fishing for 20 years. I like what I do. Not interested. And I never even returned the woman's phone call. Now understand that at that time, The Perfect Storm was on the top of every bestseller list on the planet. And the phone calls kept coming in, very similar. Major publishers, we've read The Perfect Storm, do you want to write a book? And I had to understand what an opportunity I was being handed. It was an opportunity that friends of mine would kill for. I have friends who write beautifully, who get rejection letter after rejection letter, knowing full well that whoever's written the letter probably hasn't even looked at their material. So how lucky was I to be handed this opportunity, not only to write a book, it's going to be published. So I accepted, kind of stepped up to that opportunity. It took me a year to write my first book, The Hungry Ocean, and I will say it's the most difficult work I've ever done. I've written 8 books now, and I'm still saying the same thing. It hasn't gotten any easier. Well, no one was more surprised than I was when The Hungry Ocean became a bestseller. That led to book number 2. That became a bestseller, led to book number 3, on and on we go. Well, 10 years rolled by, and I was still introducing myself as a commercial swordboat captain. It's what I felt I was, to the point of being embarrassed about being introduced as a best-selling author. I'd get phone calls asking if I could take a swordboat, but I could never, the timing was never right. It's either I have 800 lobster traps in the water, or I'm in the middle of a 60-city author tour. I can't just drop everything and go do what I really want to do. It's like totally irresponsible. Sorry about that sound. Well, 10 years go by, the phone rings, and it's an offer to take a boat sword fishing after a 10-year absence. And I thought, if I say no, it is very likely that I will never return to what I am still claiming as my first love. Phone rang, I said yes, I hung up, and immediately got very nervous about what I had just agreed to do and the degree of irresponsibility that I had achieved by saying yes, I would go. I just dropped everything to go sword fishing. What worried me? A number of things. And the title of the book, Seaworthy. When I first started fishing at the age of 19, I was told that all I needed was a strong back and a weak mind. Those 2 things suited the job very nicely for 20 years. Out of the business, sword fishing business, for 10 years, I'm returning as past middle-aged woman. Things have changed, and the question became, do the things that you gain with maturity compensate for those that fade in youth? My answer to that is yes. I found my own ways to do things and somehow got through it. Still sword fishing today. But anyway, so that was one of the major questions. I was worried about seaworthiness, which the title's very appropriate for the book. All my life, seaworthy had been, I guess, the most coveted adjective that I could aspire to, or that I could attribute to anyone. I mean, you could be a brain surgeon. I didn't care. If you couldn't dock the boat, it just didn't matter to me. I don't know why that was so important to me for so many years. It just was. I was worried about seaworthiness. What does that mean? Could I still weather a storm? Could I still put blood on the deck? Could I lead a crew of men? It was all very important to me. Again, you can read the book. It was an epic disaster, but I made it through somehow. I'd like to talk briefly about, because I just think it's appropriate in this setting. I am hugely honored and proud to be here, and I just can't believe the size of this audience. This is about a gazillion times larger than the audiences I usually have in the bookstore. But I want to mention the title of my first book, The Hungry Ocean, because it just means a lot to me. You may be aware that the title is from a Shakespearean sonnet, and I've learned through the course of my travels that that title means different things to different people. And I can't imagine that title being more meaningful than right here and right now, where we are, in this museum. I've had the tour, and I feel it. This place is that good. To me, the hungry ocean refers to the ocean's ability to totally consume. I have been fishing since I was 19. I have been consumed by it. I know it sounds cliche to say you're drawn to or taken with something. I like the way I feel when I'm at sea. I am passionate about catching fish. As proud as I am to be introduced as a best-selling author, nothing makes me prouder than saying I'm a fisherman. And I hope that never changes. I don't think it will. If you have questions, this would be a good time to start wandering up to the microphones, because I don't know where I'm going next. I don't have notes. Like I said, I'm not a lecturer. I could keep babbling, but it'd be nice if you had questions, you could kind of steer me in the right direction here, or some direction.
I have a question.
Okay, thanks. I get water.
I have a little gift for you too.
I love gifts.
All right. You're welcome. Okay, Cam Greenlaw. When the film stops rolling and those Japanese sailors cross those lines and the cameras aren't rolling, what really happens? How do you really rectify that situation? If you can't answer that.
I can't answer it totally. I make apologies all the time for many things. My appearance, well, I'm a fisherman. I don't have to apologize for not having a dress on tonight. I make apologies for what I consider salty language. And that probably would be where I'd go next with the answer to that question, would be the salty language. I'd love to blame, sometimes these answers get a little long-winded and don't really answer the question, but that's the way it goes. I just thought of something else to say. I was raised in a home where I wasn't allowed to say hate or tell someone to shut up. The shit, damn, and hell are okay, even from toddlers. I had a t-shirt, and this will mean something to some of you. I had a t-shirt that said, "Frigate is not a dirty word in Bath, Maine." So yeah, the whole Discovery thing has been so much fun. If you've seen the show, we've filmed 3 seasons. We just got done airing the 3rd season, and honestly, it's 2 film people on the boat running around with cameras. My crew and I are all mic'd unless we're using the head or sleeping. And they're with us for 60 days, and it's 4 boats. And there are 4 cameras hard mounted. There's one shining down, from the overhead on the workspace. There's one in the wheelhouse shining on the captain 24/7. So there's a lot of footage for Discovery to edit through, and it's pretty amazing what they choose to show. And I know when I signed my contract they can do whatever they want with me, and I am thankful that they did not show the reality of the Japanese gear interaction. We better go to another question. I just can't tell you what that was really like.
Not exactly a question, but I'm wondering if you could discuss. They can't hear me? Wondering if you could discuss the sustainability of sword fishing and other things that you've been involved with.
Yeah, and I thank you for asking that question. There are so many good news stories in commercial fishing, and sadly, all you hear is the bad news. I mean, the bad news gets suppressed, let's face it. I was out of the sword fishing industry for 10 years. When I got out of it, it was all gloom and doom. I didn't see it, you know? 20 years into the fishing industry, I was seeing just as many fish caught as we were catching when I was 19 years old. So I didn't see why we had to have this Give a Swordfish a Break campaign. I didn't really understand it at all. I thought there was plenty of fish. I get out of the industry for 10 years. The government is now saying the entire stock is rebuilt. We're at 100% maximum sustainable yield. Is that just because I wasn't fishing? I hope so. So I gave the swordfish a break. They're going to bounce back. But I can tell you that jumping back into it 3 years ago, and I've been the last 3 years, and hopefully this will be, you know, another season that I'll be going. One of the statistics that science likes to use to judge something like a pelagic fish, like a swordfish, is the average size of the fish landing. Now, when I was 19 years old and when I was 39 years old, we were pretty happy with a 100-pound average fish. Okay, 100 pounds, that's a pretty nice size fish. Last year, I had a 171-pound average fish. So the fish have gotten bigger. Science likes that. They think that's a really good size. Okay, joking aside, it wasn't just because I wasn't killing fish. I think one of the best implements that the government put in place was the mandatory use of the circle hook. Okay, my first 20 years sword fishing, we used a very traditional J hook. Most of the time the fish ingests the hook, it comes up dead. Well, the circle hook was designed to minimize bycatch. You know, let's not catch the marine mammals. But the beautiful thing about the circle hook is not only does it really minimize that, everything you catch is hooked in the corner of the mouth. The fish come up alive. If you catch a juvenile fish, we're not allowed to have a fish under a certain size. It comes up alive, you pop the hook out, and off it swims. It's been a great thing for the industry. There were a lot of success stories. The Maine lobster, I've been involved with lobster fishing for many years. That's a great industry. Same thing, good regulations. There's good regulations, there's bad regulations. I'm not one to say that we don't need regulations. Obviously we do. I mean, I want to catch the most fish the fastest. But I also want to know there's going to be a future in fishing for generations to come. And I think that's the mindset today. I really do. I think most fishermen like the fact that there are regulations, and they're proud of the fact that the fisheries are coming back. Yes, in the back.
Hi, Linda. Thanks
Hi.
for being here and everything you do. I'm a Virginia waterman, and I get involved a lot in management issues, environmental issues, and research. I appreciate you mentioning the good news stories that seldom make the press. Would you mind elaborating on some of the cooperative research between scientists and commercial fishermen that probably would not get done were it not for the latter partner? And sort of a second question, if you don't mind, with regard to management and the current configuration of the National Marine Fisheries Service, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the Asset Forfeiture Fund and all the big controversies that took place up in the Northeast with regard to that leadership at NOAA. If you would just elaborate on some of the good news stories from cooperative research and maybe what your perception is of management right now at the top, like NOAA.
Okay, you know, it sounds like you're a lot more in tune to this than I am, but I'll give you I'm happy to share my opinion on at least part of that. The cooperative stuff. Being involved in the sword fishing industry in the Northeast of the Grand Banks, I've always been required to accept a government observer on the boat. That doesn't mean I've had a government observer every single trip, but I've had many, and I have welcomed them. I'm not doing anything that I'm ashamed of. It's a healthy fishery. I am proud of what we do. I like the fact that an observer is aboard. What happens with the observations, I think sometimes works against fishermen. You know, there are bad regulations. I talked about this on the radio today very briefly, and I did an interview, I don't know if you heard it, but there are good regulations and bad regulations. One of the worst regulations I've ever experienced is one of these daily quotas. you're allowed, or a trip quota even, you're allowed so many pounds of whatever you're catching a trip. Now, if I'm catching codfish in the Gulf of Maine and I'm allowed 400 pounds a day, I don't care how smart I am or how good a fisherman I am, there are going to be days that I exceed 400 pounds. And the excess gets thrown overboard dead. We have begged the government to allow us to bring these fish in, not for sale. We will not profit for them. Let us give them to soup kitchens, schools, hospitals. We're talking, thank you. It's never been allowed. If you bring an excess in, you will lose your trip, you may lose your right to fish, and you'll get a pretty hefty fine. So it's a wasteful regulation, it's a bad, hopefully, I like to think that the bad regulations are being sort of weeded out and more of the good ones are coming to the surface, and that's why our fisheries are getting stronger, and some of them are in fact very healthy. But the sad thing is, my view is the fisheries are strong. The future of the fishermen is sort of grim. You have fisheries that are rebounding, but a young guy who wants to go catch fish can't get a license. Moratorium on everything? Where's the next generation of fishermen come from? Why are we rebuilding stocks if to not allow them to be harvested in a sustainable manner? And this is something I'm asked all the time, and one of the things I'd like to say is I really have a hard time with these groups, I think environmental watchdogs I call them, who tell the general public not to eat certain types of fish, right? In Monterey Bay comes to mind immediately because they have this red, yellow, and green light system. Okay, if it's a red light, don't eat it. You know what? We are in the midst of a national obesity crisis. We're fatter than we've ever been as a country. #1 killer of women in this country is heart disease. There are people out there saying, don't eat fish? Give me a break. Right? I mean, it's doing the American public such a disjustice. So I don't know if I answered your question. I answered part of it. Get me off this, because I'll keep going. All right, blonde, beautiful girl in the purple shirt. That's right.
How old were you when you caught your first swordfish?
When I caught my first swordfish, I was old. I was 19. I was 19, and that's old compared to how old you are. Are you a fisherman? How old are you? 10? How old were you when you first caught your fish? 5? I think I was catching mackerel when I was 5. And, do you want to be a fisherman when you grow up?
Yes.
Good. I'm doing something right.
You're from Maine. I want to know why you don't sound like a Mainer.
And I'm asked that everywhere I go. And I am one of these freaks of nature who, if I were here for another 24 hours, you'd think I'd lived here all of my life. And I'll give you an example of how bad that is. Wherever I am, I just sound like the locals after a certain amount of time. I've been hired in the past to read my books for Books on Tape, and I go to this little town called Grand Haven, Michigan, with Brilliance Audio, and I sit in this little recording studio. And I remember being there the first time with my first book, The Hungry Ocean, and 2 days into the recording, I'm sitting in this little soundproof booth, the piece of plexiglass between myself and these 2 women. One's a producer and one's a technician on the computer. And they're cracking up. I'm like, what's so funny? And they're like, you sound like us. We listened to day 1, you sound like you're from Maine. This isn't gonna work. This is not gonna work. So I don't know. When I'm home, I talk like I'm home. By the end of the night, I'll sound like you.
Question in the back?
You talked about the regulations. The Americans, and I presume the Canadians, have the same regulations in the Grand Banks, but what about others like Russians, Japanese, Norwegians, and so forth? Do they have to meet the same regulations, or are they sort of scarfing up the fish that we shouldn't have to pick up?
A little bit of both. The answer is a little bit of both. In the example of sword fishing, it's a highly migratory species. There are many countries that fish on swordfish. Why are we the only country that's required to use a circle hook? We all have quotas. The bluefin tuna, you hear a lot about bluefin tuna and the fact that they may shut down certain parts of the New England fishery or the East Coast fishery. What we don't catch is given to another country. So it's not like saving any fish, and it's giving those fish or that quota to a country who is less stringent in their regulations. So you're not saving fish, you're just punishing the people who are sort of being regulated the most. I mean, U.S. fishermen, whether it's recreational or commercial, we are the most highly regulated, monitored, managed, patrolled group of fishermen in the world. I always tell people, you know, because people want to know, people want to do the right thing about what they're eating. Should we be eating this? God, I want to do the right thing. If it's harvested domestically, it's offered to you, it has been through great scrutiny, you should eat it and feel good about it. You should question things that are imported from other countries because they aren't held to the same standards.
How does your crew feel about working for a celebrity now? Does that change things?
Unfortunately, no. You know, my crew are somewhat celebrities too. They're on TV. So, yeah, it hasn't affected us too much, I don't think. It's been fun. It's been fun to be included in the Discovery Channel. As I said, it's nice to have something that I've been doing since I was 19 years old, suddenly getting a lot of focus and attention, in mostly a positive light. So it's good. Yes?
When did you first go sailing?
Why did I first go sword fishing? Sailing. Sailing.
Yeah.
I didn't go sailing.
Like on a boat.
On a boat?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Because when I was your age, maybe even a little bit younger, I loved the water. I loved boats. I mean, it's all I did as a kid. I lived to go try to catch something. So I don't know. You know, you hear that salt water gets in your blood or runs in your veins, and that happened to me at a very early age. So I don't know. I found something that I loved to do. I worked really hard at it, and fortunately got good at it.
I have a question about how you feel about offshore drilling and or offshore wind farms as far as how it relates to the fishing world.
Okay, well, this doesn't have anything to do with the fishing world, but where I live, we pay 32 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. It's probably the highest in the country. So I'm kind of liking the offshore wind thing. I think there's plenty of room in the ocean. I don't have a problem with the offshore wind farms at all. Offshore drilling, I do have a problem with, you know, in the wake of the disasters that we've seen recently. It's pretty amazing to me that, you know, we have technology to drill and find oil, but nothing in place to take care of the disasters in seemingly a very long period of time. Now, I met someone the other night who was telling me that the fishing is actually very, very good in the area where they thought the fishing would be destroyed because of the most recent oil spill. So that's kind of mind-boggling. I don't know what the reason is for that.
We have a question back here.
I have a question back here for you, Linda.
I'm looking. Where?
All the way in the back.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm a fellow Colby graduate and been a fan and admirer of yours for many years. I think I've read every single one of your books, and I want to thank you for what you do. I think you're a great role model for many other women.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask, what advice do you have for the next generation? You've heard from a couple of younger folks tonight. What do you see? What advice would you give them for younger women if they wanted to be fishermen and follow in your footsteps?
You know, I think I've probably already said it, and I think it bears repeating. That's, you find something you love to do, work hard at it, and you'll be fulfilled. I mean, that's like the most, I don't measure my success by pounds of fish caught. I do not measure my success by numbers of books sold. I love what I do. I like the feeling of what I do. That's the greatest success. And you know, success is kind of an individual thing if you take it away from the dollar bill. So I guess that's my advice. I'm asked that question a lot. And that's it. I mean, it's nothing new or profound. It's follow your dream. It's find something you love to do. You know, work at what you love. You'll be fulfilled. I'll tell you what. I often share. I'm asked to talk to schools quite often. You know, kids, and I'm always compelled to share the worst and the best advice I've ever received. Both of those pieces of advice came from my mother. Okay, I'll start with the worst advice. And that was when I graduated from Colby College and decided to keep fishing. And my mother told me I was wasting my education. Commercial fishing is no place for an educated young person. You need to get what she considered a real job. You know, and I go to schools and I talk and I say, bad advice. Your education can never be wasted. Your education becomes you. It's one of the things in your life that you will achieve that can never be taken away. Can't be wasted. And to sort of redeem my mother, best advice I ever received. And again, it was like yesterday. I was probably 7 years old, and we were having this big family clam bake, right? Cousins, aunts, uncles, we're all gathering on the shore. We're going to cook things over the open fires. My Aunt Sally was organizing a bunch of kids, all the cousins, to do some chores. She wanted the little boys to go into the woods and get branches and sharpen, you know, the ends to cook things over the fire, hot dogs, marshmallows, whatever. And she wanted the little girls to stay on the beach and fold napkins or whatever. Well, I was a tomboy. I had my jackknife in my pocket, and I headed right for the woods with my male cousins, right to the edge of the woods, and my Aunt Sally bellowed, "Lenny, back here with the girls, you know, fold some napkins." I wasn't a crybaby as a kid, but I was pretty distraught about having been born a girl at 7 years old. So I sat on a rock and I started to cry. My mother, she missed the conversation. She comes over, she's like, "What are you crying about? You know, we're supposed to have this big fun family day. What's going on?" And I asked my mother, I said, "Do I have to be a girl?" She said, "No, you can be anything you want to be." Since then, my world's been pretty good. I'm sure my mother has regretted that advice, but as I said, not new or profound, but pretty simple stuff. Yeah.
Good.
Hi, I have two questions. One is, do you enjoy eating swordfish? And the second question is, what kind of recipes are in your cookbooks?
Two easy questions. I love
All right, I'll think of another one.
swordfish. All right. It's so funny, you know. I will answer your questions if I remember what they are when I'm done with this thought. It's so funny, you know. Usually, my audience is much smaller, and it's usually in a bookstore. And there's a huge difference between the questions that men ask and the questions that women ask. I mean, men ask, "What's the biggest fish you ever caught? What kind of engine do you have in your boat?" You know, those are so easy. I know that, and women always ask things about, like, what does it feel like to be a female, whatever. So it was like call on the men if I have an option, but that was like a real easy female question, so I will answer it. Yeah, I love swordfish. You know, I'm very lucky. I get to eat it, you know, right when it comes aboard the boat. Quite often we catch something that we call a chunk, which is a fish that a shark may have taken a bite out of, and the butcher or the guy that takes care of the fish, in the process of getting that cleaned up to put down the fish hold so that we can sell the remains, we always get a few steaks off of it. So I love swordfish. Some of my favorite recipes in the cookbook are swordfish. I love it on the grill. It can be very simple, just grilled swordfish, butter, salt, pepper, it's all good. Or it can, you know, be a little bit more elaborate with a, you know, fresh salsa with some fruit in it. I've done 2 cookbooks with my mother, and this Maine Summers cookbook, which is the one that was just released. 2 favorite recipes, probably my mom's favorite recipe, my favorite recipe of my mother's in the book is a rib recipe, and it's just like some of the best stuff you ever put in your mouth. And my favorite recipe of mine in the book is a panko coconut cod. Love codfish too. I like it all this much. There's nothing I don't eat. It's all good.
Here.
I'm sorry, this is one of those women questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm just letting you know in advance. So you whenever I watch the show, and they're always talking about you're the only woman swordfish captain. And I wonder if you sort of didn't follow your path, you sort of made your own path. And now looking back, do you see younger women following you, or do you still feel that, you know, it's sort of, they're going other ways, they're folding the napkins?
For years, I never had a woman ask me for a job. And on book tour, people say, oh, you know, have you ever had a female crew member? And the answer is always like, no, no one's ever asked me for a job. And I think it was that it just wasn't, commercial fishing has not been, especially sword fishing, has not been sort of in the realm of possibilities for young women. But now, you know, with things like The Perfect Storm and Swords, Life on the Line and my books, it has sort of opened at least the possibility. And now I do have women asking me. And I told Discovery that I'd like to do an all-female crew. I think that'd be great TV. They're already casting it. It's going to be very expensive because, you know, women are smarter than men. I have guys who listen, Facebook me, they find me on the dock, they track me down, and they say, take me fishing. You don't even have to pay me. Really? Really? You want to go for 60 days and work like 20 hours a day and not get paid? Cool, you're hired. Women recently approached me, they're like, how much money can I make on this trip? So it's totally different. But I still haven't had a female crew member, but that's going to change very soon. Yes. How big a fish? The biggest fish I ever caught? 635 pound. And that's headed and gutted, so it's just like the carcass. I've seen bigger, you know, much bigger fish, but I didn't happen to catch them. I've seen them unloaded off other boats. Yeah, they're big fish. Great. Yes?
I'm interested in emerging and newest technology out there to help captains fishing safe sea and make clean seals and liners.
Okay, the question is about new technology that might make the fishing industry safer. I can tell you that in the 10 years that I was absent from the fishing industry, better communications. We always had, you know, VHFs and single sideband radios, but now we actually have satellite phones. Very rudimentary, but still satellite email. Eye in the sky, satellite imagery of weather. I can be on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland and I can track a weather system that's down here. And I can track it, I can look at it now, I can look at it 2 hours from now, I know how fast it's moving, I know if it's intensifying, I know what direction it's moving. Yeah, we still have all the old information like the single sideband weather report or a fax machine weather map, but you can make your own map. And it's more information, more up-to-date information, just instantaneous, faster. So that's all good, and it does make it safer. Okay, yes, microphone.
I have to ask this very intellectual question. Everybody here wants to ask you, especially you, and that's about George Clooney.
The question is about George Clooney. And yes, I met him. Now I know that there was a rumor going around about George Clooney, and I started it. Yeah, I did get to meet him, and when I heard he was playing the lead, I begged Warner Brothers to let me play myself. It seemed they wanted a real actress, and I was delighted with who they chose, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. It took me months to learn her name, but she's lovely. Yeah, he is just as handsome in person as he is on the screen. And I, you know, had a 30-second relationship with him. So. Yes.
Question in the back.
Okay.
This is some segue, or that wasn't a segue into my question. But at any rate, in light of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and similar ones in other oceans, are you seeing the effects of pollution, and what, if anything, can we, should we, what are we to do about it?
Well, what I have seen in my fishing career, like over the past 31 years in regards to pollution, is that it's gotten better. I think things are cleaner. We fish for swordfish where two major bodies of water come together. East of the Grand Banks is where the hot water of the Gulf Stream pushes up into the very cold water of the Labrador Current. We think we're fishing, or we talk about fishing, this temperature gradient. We're really fishing a tide change. And we fish in sync with the moon, so when the tide's running harder, these temperature breaks really make up much more, they're more defined, they're easier to follow, the fish are more congregated. It's also where all the garbage collects, okay? At the age of 19, when I started fishing, I was the youngest person on the boat, by far. And I know it's a generational thing. We were not, and the old timers were not worried about pollution when I was 19 years old, okay? I went fishing on a boat that put everything in garbage bags, and when the garbage bag was full, it went over the side. Okay, that was hard for me. I am in the generation of give a hoot, don't pollute. My family car was evidence of that. I mean, you couldn't like kick your way into it or kick your way out of it. Everything ends up on the floor of the car. You don't throw things out the window. But you know, my generation and generations that follow me are cognizant of this. It is a problem. No, you can't throw plastic in the water. So I think, you know, the last 30 years, things have really cleaned up. We used to see a lot of plastic collecting on these temperature breaks. Is a big weed line, you know, seaweed, sargasso sea, whatever. You see the big rafts of seaweed when you're out boating. We used to see a lot of plastic tangled up in that stuff. Not so anymore. So I think it is much better than it used to be. I'm often asked about the effects of global warming, and I don't know, I just really don't have an opinion on that. Yes, things change. Some things are for better, some things are for worse. All the old timers that I'm used to fishing around, these are men who are 80 years old, who've been fishing since they were 10. They really tell me about these cycles. You know, this is good, that's bad, it gets better, it gets worse, it's good, they know it's gonna get good again, it's gonna get worse again. So it's hard to know what is a natural cycle and what is actually caused. I mean, in one lifetime, to think you're gonna observe something of global warming, I don't know. So I don't really have an answer for that.
You got back.
Have you had any more difficulties with the Canadians?
I assume you're talking about my arrest. Yeah. No, I haven't.
The law degree would have helped you. Should have listened to your mother.
Yeah, as it turned out, I should have listened to my mother. And I have a story that I can't tell, because I know there's some kids here. So let's see, what's one that I can tell? Yeah, no, I haven't had any difficulties, any further difficulties with the Canadians. That was a very expensive mistake. The fine was $38,000. I was convicted of 2 charges, entering and fishing in Canadian water. Typically we're supposed to fish in international water, anything outside of 200 miles. I had been fishing that area of the ocean for very close to 30 years. So it wasn't like there was some anomaly with the Gulf Stream. I know what the Gulf Stream's gonna do. I know what the tide does in that part of the ocean. There's just no way that my gear should have drifted north or over the line into illegal territory. After I was released from jail and allowed to go back out fishing, when I was arrested, I left a very small piece of gear, like a mile of gear in the water. And it's like, well, this is the least of my problems. You know, I'm under arrest, I'm just going in, forget about it. When I got back out fishing, a friend of mine called on the radio and said, hey, you know, I found that piece of gear that you left behind, and it's been run over by a ship. It's covered with bottom paint, anti-fouling paint. It's all balled up. And that's the first time that it sort of made sense to me. Because up until then I was like, what the hell happened? How was my gear on the wrong side of that line? There's just no way it ever should have happened. I had a Canadian attorney who told me that I had a due diligence defense, was not to be. Guilty, expensive. But no further problems. Yes. Sorry.
Linda, thanks so much for your books this evening. And I wondered if you feel like commenting about the safety of your industry.
No, the safety of the industry. Well, you know, we are regulated as far as safety goes. You know, we have the dockside Coast Guard examinations, and I wouldn't run a boat that didn't have that examination. But by nature of where we fish, it's dangerous. We're a minimum of 1,000 miles from the dock. There's no helicopter that can come get someone or drop us a pump. So it is dangerous. We fish during hurricane season. So, weather is obviously the biggest factor in the danger. I'm asked about the Coast Guard quite frequently, and honestly, I have great respect for the U.S. Coast Guard. Not that they can come get me where I fish, but I've never in my lifetime heard a vessel call the Coast Guard or make a Mayday call and not get an answer right away. And that gives you peace of mind and gives you some feeling of security. You know someone's hearing you if you're on the radio. So that's good. The safety issues are, like I said, weather, fatigue, coupled weather and fatigue is bad. We have life rafts, we have survival suits, we have EPIRBs. We hope we don't have to use them.
Does the fatigue enter into the decision-making and
Yeah, the fatigue, let's face it, fatigue and poor fishing often push a captain to make bad decisions, right? We don't have enough fish on the boat, we can't go in, there's a hurricane coming, let's stay out. It's that simple. And, we are plagued with bad decisions all the time, and we hope to not make bad ones, but weather is weather, and sometimes you just don't know. We always say, well, we'll stay out, we'll ride it out. It's probably not going to be as bad as it's being forecast or as what we see. Sometimes it's not as bad, sometimes it's worse. It's Mother Nature.
Linda, thank you for your kind words about the Coast Guard. I spent 30 years in the Coast Guard, retired 2 years ago.
Well, thank you.
It's an awesome service. I want to congratulate you for something. Thank you for being a lifetime member of PETA, People Eating Tasty Animals. I also want to ask you a question. Do you ever get seasick?
An old friend of mine, who's long dead, told me one time, if you ain't been sick, you ain't been there. I have been there. Oh yeah. And you only have to be seasick once. You never forget that feeling. And I've had very few crew members who can claim to have never been seasick. It's most people get over it.
Linda.
In the middle.
Right here.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
I was just curious, on average, how much gear do you think you lose on a trip due to part-offs and tangles and things like that? And a second question, did you make the same bet with the captain of the Eagle Eye this past season as you did previously?
Okay, I did make the same bet with Scotty, Captain Scotty. It's like an annual thing. And he won the first 2 years, I won the third year, and they didn't air it. What's up with that?
That's why I was asking,
right?
because we
Why
didn't
didn't they
see it.
show it? I finally win the biggest fish of the season.
Was it the 468 sword that you caught?
Yes. Yep. See, you're paying attention. What was the other part of your question? I can't remember.
How much gear do you normally
an average
lose?
amount of gear that we lose? It really depends. On our spool, we have between 40 and 50 miles of line. And somewhere in the boat, we have stored 5 to 10 miles of spare line. And we hope to God we don't have to use it. But tangled up with the Japanese or just a lot of part-offs, bad weather, sometimes we have to put that line on the drum. So I'd say as an average, maybe 5 miles a trip in little pieces. It's not like you're going to lose a 5-mile chunk at a time because we have these beeper buoys, makes it really easy to kind of home in on the gear, and when you part it off, it makes it easy to kind of track it down. But small pieces here and there, yeah, maybe 5 miles a trip.
Hey Linda, back here. Over. To the left. To the left.
That left. Port. Okay, I got it.
You got my dream job, so you're pretty lucky. But I was wondering if you actually take time for yourself to go just out personally fishing, and if so, what's your favorite type of fish to go for?
Yeah, I am accused of taking busman's holidays all the time. Close to home, this time of year, I like striper fishing with live mackerel. I enjoy catching the bait. Last winter, I made a trip to Vieques, which is an island off Puerto Rico. Visited a friend on St. Croix, went fishing with her for marlin. I've been to a lot of little fishing trips. Venezuela, marlin fishing. I like fishing. I enjoy it. I was in Miami this last winter also. Chartered a boat for 3 days. It was really fun. Yeah, I like it all. Yeah, thank you. Where are we?
Captain Greenlaw, I thank you very much for your comments about the Coast Guard. Those of us who were in it really appreciate that. But I have a question for you. You talked about your love of fishing, but it's got to go beyond that. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be on the bridge of that fishing vessel when the sun breaks on the Grand Banks.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. There's so many amazing things about being on the water, and I don't probably need to explain that to most of the people in this room. There's just something happening all the time, and yes, the sun coming up over the bow is a huge thrill every day. It just energizes me. I could get 2 hours sleep a night, but boy, when that sun comes up and I see it come up, I am ready to go. The life that we see, I see whales every day. Every single day fishing, I see whales. You don't see a whale without jabbing the guy next to you with your elbow and saying, "Did you see that?" It's that cool. You see them every day, all day long. You're still saying, "Hey, humpback, finback, minke, did you see that one?" So yeah, it's pretty special.
My next two-part question for you. Thanks for being here first. On sword fishing, do you actually need a sword fishing license, or does your commercial, captain's license take care of that?
In the sword fishing industry, the boat is licensed, not the fisherman. So the boat that I run, the Hannah Bowden, is licensed, and yes, you do need a pelagic longline swordfish tuna license.
Okay. And the other one is, have you found a better blue shark recipe yet?
I was and for those of you who do not watch Discovery Channel, I made a bet with one of my crew members and lost, and the consequence was he got to cook blue shark for me. Blue shark is inedible. And as Johnny Brewer was cooking this, and they didn't air all of it, he was like frying it in the frying pan, and he had the cover on to make sure it was cooked through. Thank God I didn't want sushi blue shark. And he pulled the cover off of the frying pan, his face was kind of over the pan, and he literally, his eyes started to water, he almost passed out. He put the cover back on, he's like, "You don't have to eat this, you can't do this." But of course the cameras are rolling. I lost the bet, now everyone's expecting me to eat the goddamn thing. I was literally choking it down. I was torn between laughing because I couldn't believe I was doing it and throwing up. There's no way to make that stuff edible.
For those that haven't seen that shot, would you explain why it smells so bad, it tastes so bad? What happens to the bodily function?
Yeah, according to Johnny Brewer, when he's like prepping me for eating this thing, he says, well, blue sharks, they urinate through their skin or something. I don't know. So he's telling me this thing smells like an old folks' home. I'm like, ew. It's like a combination of urine and death. Do you have any ketchup? It was bad, but I did eat it. I didn't welch on my bed.
All right, Linda?
I don't know where you are.
Right over here.
Sorry.
That's okay. Hi.
No. All right, now. She wants to know how many fish you catch every day.
Well, some days I catch 100 fish. That'd be a really good day. Some days I catch 1 fish. And that day sucks. Usually it's somewhere in between. You know what, it's hard to say like day to day what goes on, but I mean, just 30 years of commercial fishing, I mean, I've had years where I thought I was gonna be rich. And I've had years that I've qualified for free oil and food stamps. Most of the time it's somewhere in between. kind of squeak out a living.
We have time for just 3 more questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I was wondering, in your career, how many road waves have you encountered?
Yeah, road waves. I always get that question, and you know, when I first started fishing, we didn't talk about rogue waves, but the guys that I was fishing with referred to a rogue wave as a queer sea, or one that, you know, would come from a different direction or maybe be a little bit bigger than what you're expecting. So millions. I've never experienced one that was devastating, but it's not unusual, you know, just be kind of going along your merry way, doing your thing, and then bang, you know, like, where did that come from? So it's not unusual at all. Most of them are not, you know, to the degree of fatality. 2 more questions.
Hi. I was wondering if when you watch the series play out, if you were amazed at the level of competitiveness the other skippers felt towards you, or were you amazed when they weren't answering your calls on the radio and had the radio silence and maybe sent you in different directions?
Yeah, you know, I thought these guys were my friends, right? And I'm not privy to any of the footage, so it's like a surprise to me to see how it's edited, what Discovery Channel does with it. So it was a little surprising that Scotty had to be bleeped so many times in the last episode talking about me. But that's okay, his day will come. One last question.
How many tons is your ship and how long is it?
The Hannah Bowden, which is the boat that I ran last season and many years ago, and hopefully this season, is 200 ton. Documented at 200. If you go over 200, you require a Coast Guard license. It's very interesting how these things are documented, right? I do have a Coast Guard license, but most commercial fishermen that would run that boat do not. So it's a 200-ton vessel, 100 feet long. That was too easy. One more question. Okay, the question is about the Big Eye, which is a boat featured in the show. And last night I did a talk in North Carolina, and the question came up about the Big Eye. I'm like, you dare even mention the name of that boat? That guy's from Wanchese, North Carolina. And people usually ask, is he really that bad? Oh yeah, he really is. Let me tell you how I know that. I never really knew Captain Chompers. I mean, I knew him on the radio a little bit, fished around him, and never really liked fishing around him. Well, like a year and a half ago, I was part of the deal with Discovery was one of the sponsors of the show is Coors Light, and I was hired. This is great. I was hired to go to New York City and drink Coors Light for 7 hours with Chompers and Slick, the Francis Ann captain. And first of all, I wish that we had a sponsor that made something other than Coors Light. I'm not a beer drinker. Coors Light is like not my favorite. 7 hours with Chompers drinking beer. And every time you take a sip, there's someone pouring more beer into your glass because they have to keep the glasses at the same level. They're trying to come up with 30 seconds of footage. 7 hours to come up with 30 seconds. It was all Chomper's fault. But anyway, yeah, he's pretty bad. No, the boat really shouldn't be fishing the Grand Banks, and sadly, I think that's a function of getting money from Discovery to be there. It's much too small. It's not in any condition to be fishing the Grand Banks, but he's gotten away with it. Fiberglass, yeah, it's a fiberglass boat. Too small.
One last question.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Boston, Mass, and I went fishing to earn my money for college just like you did. What do you attribute the decline of the fishing industry in Gloucester to be over the years, the past 30, 40 years? I can remember it far different than it is now.
Sure, Gloucester was obviously a very thriving fishing port. We had many up and down the eastern seaboard. There are very few left, right? New Bedford now is like the richest port anywhere because of the scallops making this great comeback, right? Scallops very healthy. Gloucester is dwindled. There's a little bit of commercial fishing going on. What happens, as you know, when the fishing fleet sort of gets lax and you lose boats, government regulation, poor fishing, whatever you want to talk about, you lose your working waterfront. right? Any place that a boat could tie up is bought by somebody with some money, they develop it, it's made into condos or a nice restaurant. You lose your infrastructure, and even if the fishing comes back and they allow you to fish, right, there's no place to go. You got it. You got it. Thank you very much.